Will Gunnar Stockton make Georgia's offense better in 2025 than it was in 2024 with Carson Beck as the starting quarterback? Now, don't take that question as me saying directly, is Gunnar Stockton better than Carson Beck? That's not what I mean when I'm having this conversation, but is Gunnar going to be a guy that elevates this Georgia offense? It's going to be a new look offense, and that's why you can't compare it exactly, right? And you look at what Carson Beck did in 2023, and it's not the same thing, and Georgia's offense was not the same thing as it was in 2024. But with what we know, with Gunnar Stockton, likely the starting quarterback for Georgia this coming season, will he... Look, the straight-up answer is, will he be good enough for this to be a championship team, right? That's the real question I'm asking here. It's the real question that all of y'all are probably thinking about as, time ticks. 8 months away from the season is going to go by a lot faster than you think, and just spring ball is right around the corner. So Carson Beck has entered the transfer portal. That was news from a couple of days ago, and Gunnar Stockton looks more and more like he's the guy for Georgia in 2024. Or 2025, excuse me. I mean, I get used to saying 2025. What do we know about Gunnar, real quick? Dual threat, right? Has better legs than Carson did. Not quite as good as Stetson Bennett, but is not afraid to run the ball and to lower the shoulder. He's pretty accurate. He's pretty on time with things. I think that we learned in Notre Dame that he could sling it, and that he could sling it downfield. And we know that he cares about Georgia, right? He said recently that his dream was to be the starting quarterback at Georgia, to be the starting quarterback at a school like this. He's a guy that grew up, I don't know, how far is Clayton, Tiger, Raven County? How far is that, right? You just shoot up 441 from Athens. I'm about to get on 441 myself, but you just shoot up 441 and you're there in an hour or two, right? Somewhere in between that range. All you got to do is go right down the highway, and Gunnar Stockton, now he's at his new home. And so there's that aspect of it that kind of adds to it. And it, at the very minimum, it adds to the support that the quarterback gets for Georgia. But homegrown, the guys love him, right? You saw how Oscar Delp acted after the SEC championship. You saw how Lawson Lucky treated him. And I think that one of the biggest things that I learned at the Sugar Bowl was just that the team really cares about Gunnar and really rallied behind Gunnar. It was, to me, a little abnormal that you see that out of a team that just lost its starting quarterback that's projected to be an NFL guy, and you're a team that's trying to make a playoff run. You're in the Sugar Bowl and you're in the College Football Playoff. Well, Sugar Bowl Media Day, you walk around I think it was called the Napoleon Ballroom at the Sheraton Hotel in New Orleans. That's where we were at, if you know what I'm talking about. When you're walking around that Napoleon Ballroom and all the players are sitting all over the place and you got some of them at podiums, everybody's just echoing the same confidence that they have in Gunnar, the same trust that they have in Gunnar, the same excitement. Georgia ultimately lost that game and looked bad doing it for the most part. But ahead of the game, the team was relaxed and the team did not seem concerned that Beck was out of the picture. I don't think that has anything to do with negative thoughts towards Carson Beck. At least that's not the way I want to think about it, because that's not good. So I don't think it was the team didn't like Carson, but I think the team just loves Gunnar. And it's going to be a new team this season, and part of it will be about them rallying behind them. Part of it will be about the talent on the field. Waited too long to introduce myself. Ryan Curley from Dawg Post newsletter. It's in the link below, the dawgpost.com newsletter. I've got in the link of the link is in the description of this video down below. I hope I haven't been saying that wrong over and over because I caught myself there. We're still pushing out content, still blasting it out to your inbox, so make sure you're checking that out every single day. Gunnar. So he ended up in his minimal time as the starting quarterback this season, but really all in all, a little bit of garbage time, second half of the Texas game in the SEC Championship, and then the entire game of Notre Dame equated to him going 45 for 64 for 444 yards, a touchdown and an interception. He had his completion percentage was 70.3, 6.9 yards per pass. It was 7.8 for Carson Beck, so something that didn't downgrade as much. He's a guy that ran for positive yards for sure, but when you add it all up and you add in the sack numbers, he ended up with negative yards on the season. So when you look at that stat, don't think too much about it. He's definitely a guy that can run the football. You saw it against Florida State. And you saw it against Texas. The Georgia likes to run kind of an RPO-based offense where a lot of things are around the line of scrimmage. You didn't see that against Notre Dame. You saw a different game plan. You saw Gunner dropping back in a much more traditional sense. Pretty much saw the same offense that you saw all year long with Carson Beck with Gunner Stockton in it. It was a little puzzling when you think about it and you think about what the strengths are for this team when he's out there. To me, I think that in terms of what you saw with Gunner, you can take away things from that. I think in terms of what's going to happen in 2025, you shouldn't take too much away from just what happened in that game. And the personnel is going to be completely different. So let's get to that part. Carson in 2023 was really good. Stetson in 21 and 22 was really good. What was the theme there? They were throwing to NFL receivers. They were handing it off to NFL running backs. They had NFL offensive linemen in front of them. That was still a little bit of the case this past season, but it wasn't the same. And you saw Beck have a worse season partially because of it. Part of Beck's problems were on Carson Beck and just not seeing the field and trying to force it, and it hurt Georgia in the long run. And Georgia went through a rough month and a rough 5-game stretch in the middle of the season. In 2025, the offensive line is going to look different. They're going to replace 4 out of 5 starters. You're going to get a few guys that have experience, like Drew Bobo, Micah Morris, and Monroe Freeling, namely, Ernest Green as well. And then you're going to have some players who may win a job who really don't have a lot of experience, right? But those are a few names that do. On the outside, Georgia lacked NFL talent, right? They didn't have a Lad McConkey or an A.D. Mitchell or a Brock or even a Ryan Williams or Jeremiah Smith. They're just a freak out there. This year, they will have Zachariah Branch, one of the most explosive players in college football, a receiver that I believe has a little bit to prove as a 5-star plus type of prospect, as a consensus number 1 receiver in the 2023 class. I think he's got a little bit to prove, but he's an electric returner. He's a guy that can take the ball to the house on a screen, on a slant. That's the kind of guy you want to surround Gunner Stockton with. That's the kind of guy that wasn't at Georgia in 2024. Another guy that wasn't at Georgia, at least for the entirety of the season, was a 6'6" receiver from Texas A&M and Noah Thomas. Now he'll be at Georgia this season, and they'll have a huge weapon on the outside. That's what Colby Young was supposed to be. Off-the-field issues prevented that from happening. Ra Thomas, to an extent, was supposed to be a little bit of that. Off-the-field issues prevented that from happening. Now you get Noah Thomas. So you've got your burner and your playmaker in Zachariah Branch. You got a big outside vertical threat and red zone threat in Noah Thomas. You return the same tight ends. I think you'll get better play out of the tight ends, especially with a guy like Gunner Stockton. They like to scheme up the tight ends for him. You've seen that on the tape. You saw it against Florida State. You saw it against Texas. They're going to scheme up tight ends with Gunner Stockton out there. I think between Delp and Lucky and Jaden Riddell, get familiar with the name Jaden Riddell, a prospect, not a prospect, a guy that was a true freshman this past year and will be a redshirt freshman next year. Number 23, a tight end for Georgia. I think he will be better for this Georgia offense. Assuming this team just plays better, this offensive weapon room should be better, right? I didn't mention Dylan Bell yet, a guy who I think just needs a reset, right? You just got to move on from what happened in 2024. Regressed, right? So I think he's got to get better. Georgia clearly wanted him back. That's my takeaway from them going after his brother in the transfer portal, who I don't think is going to play. So to me, that's what that is with Dylan Bell. Nitro Tuggle, a guy who needs to get on the field just because he's a good talent, and I think he can get separation. I think he's got good hands. So Nitro Tuggle is someone who I think will see the field more. Sokovie White, a 3-star prospect from this past year, who I thought looked pretty good at G-Day. I thought looked pretty good in the spring, and in the moments that he did get in garbage time early on this year, thought he looked pretty solid. Someone to keep an eye on. They're bringing in a lot of weapons. C.J. Wiley, Talon Tabor, Ellis Williams, Ethan Barber. Those are the ones that people are going to remember. Talon Tabor, to me, has a chance to be I don't know about starter, but a day one contributor. That's the way I would put it. I think he's that type of talent at wide receiver. And then this running back room is going to be the same pretty much. But you'd think maybe you get a little more health consistency out of Trevor Etienne. Maybe you get a more secure ball carrier, is the way I'll put it, with Nate Frazier and someone who has another year of experience and gets better. Here's the thing. Personnel is great. The personnel looked pretty great on paper a year ago. when we were talking about Georgia heading into 2024. It turned out to not be as good as we thought. And we knew it was going to be a downgrade to an extent. But you thought that with Carson Beck that he could elevate the offense. So now, here's the question that I have. It really boils down to this. Will Gunnar Stockton elevate a better supporting cast? Because I think he's getting a little bit better of a supporting cast in 2025. And I think he's a guy that opens up the run game in certain matchups with his legs and his ability to do the read option fakes in the RPO. So I think you saw a little bit of everything out of Gunnar over the course of the last 2 years. You saw him slinging around against Notre Dame. Obviously in high school you saw him slinging around, and you saw him run a lot against Texas and against Florida State in the Orange Bowl last season when he got a quarter and a half to himself as the starting quarterback. So that's the real question. Will he elevate a better offensive room? Because I mean, it's got to be better. And that's the way you look at this, right? They're bringing in talent. They're replacing talent. The offensive line to me is a question mark just because of the lack of experience you'll see there in a couple of spots. But if they're recruiting these guys, like these classes of offensive linemen have been kind of ridiculous the last couple of years. They need to play up to their talent level. You're losing a lot of guys to the NFL on that room, but if they can't protect Gunnar, this is all a moot point. But I think the weapons for sure on the outside are better, and I think the running back room, even though it's remaining the same in terms of the personnel, I have a hard time seeing it just be worse in general. The running game was bad. I think that a lot of that had to do with the offensive line's play. So maybe in a way you look at a new offensive line as a good thing, but I think just another year of experience for these guys in the program. Etienne and Frazier were first-year players in the program this past year. Dwight Phillips was. Chauncey Bowens was. So you get the Robinsons back and Roderick and Branson. I call them the Robinsons, and the Robinsons but they've been on the sideline a lot. Altogether, it's hard to see it being worse, but it's on Gunnar's shoulders to a certain extent, and this job looks like it's his. Will it be better in 2025?